take 1,000,000 apes, 1,000,000 monkeys, and let them predict the stock market. Will the Dow Jones rise or fall next week? They have two buttons. If they press on the left side of the button, they have the opinion that the stock market is going to sink. If they press on the right side of the button, they think the stock market is going to rise. After a week, you check what the Dow Jones was doing, and roughly half of the monkeys will have been right, and half of the monkeys will have been wrong. So you send the ones home that were wrong. You continue with the ones that were right. Again, you ask them, the remaining ones, will the Dow Jones rise or fall next week? Again, they will vote with their buttons, and half of those will be right, half of those will be wrong. You send the ones home that were wrong. You continue with the ones that were right. And you do this for week 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. And after about 20 weeks, you will have one monkey that was consistently right the whole time. He predicted the Dow Jones without fail. And this, of course, is the success monkey. That's a better performance than any Wall Street trader has. And if he had played with real money, he would be a billionaire right now. And you know what's going to happen to this success monkey. The media is going to swoop in. They will analyze his every move. They will check when does he get up, how much sleep does he need, how does he take showers, does he eat 1 banana or 3 bananas in the morning. They will look at his parents. What kind of education did he have? What kind of friends does he have? They will interview his friends, his parents, and write about this. And of course, nothing that's written is a lie. Everything is there. He had that performance. It was stellar performance on the stock market. And he has these little quirks that he has. And after a year, you go to a bookstore. And you walk in there and you see a shelf full of books dedicated to the monkey success. You'll have titles like The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Monkeys, or From Good Monkey to Great Monkey. And that's the outcome bias. That's actually a fallacy we fall into, and that's called the outcome bias. We look at the outcome, but we don't see the process by which this outcome came about. And that's a mistake we often fall into when we look at the world. We now are at a privileged position. We know the story of this monkey, I just told you. It's pure randomness, pure chance, a pure statistical coincidence. But when we look at the world, all we see is outcomes, and we generally don't see what's behind this outcome. So when I heard this story a couple of years ago, I got excited. And I wanted to find out, are there more errors and mistakes and fallacies like this? And I went to the research. I was diving deep in, and I'm happy to report there are between 100 and 120 systematic cognitive errors and biases. Now, I was a writer before and an entrepreneur. I write fiction. I've never written a non-fiction book, but I dug in and systematically wrote about these errors, and now this book, The Art of Thinking Clearly, became a bestseller. Now, clearly, we don't have time to go through all the 100 to 120 cognitive errors today. Iris Bonet has already talked about some biases today, and I will just give you another 2 biases. That way you see in which direction we are. I went with my wife to the movie theater. We had purchased the tickets before. And on the way, it was a beautiful summer night, beautiful lush weather, and I was telling her, do you really want to go to the movies? Why don't we just sit on the lake and watch the sunset? Wouldn't that be nicer than sitting in a dark room right now? And she said, well, I'd love to do that too, but we purchased those tickets already. They cost $20, and we're going to lose the $20 if we do that. And that is a classic mistake we always fall into, and it's called the sunk cost fallacy. The $20 have been spent already. They should not have any say in what decision we take now. It's non-recoverable expense. So we should just take this moment and say, do I really want to go to the movie right now, or do I want to sit on the lake and watch the sunset? The $20 should not play a role at all. But we see this very often, that non-recoverable expenses, stuff we have already invested, somehow creep up to us. We have a big project, a marketing project, or a branding initiative, and we see it's going nowhere at all. But we tell ourselves, but we've invested so many millions already in this campaign, we can't just stop right now. Or you are in a company that you don't like. You want to make a career move, you think about it, you actually should switch, but then you say, well, I've invested so many years with this company, I can't just leave right now. The Vietnam War was a great example of this. When it became clear that the US can't win the war, they should have stopped. But voices from the government said, no, we've incurred so many losses, we've incurred so many dead bodies, we owe it to these dead bodies and their families that we continue on fighting. But realistically, that is a sunk cost fallacy. Look at it. These dead bodies are non-recoverable. They should not play a role. We should only say, at this moment, does it make sense to continue the war, or does it not make sense to continue the war? So this creeps up a lot of time, the sunk cost fallacy. My wife purchased shoes, beautiful stilettos. They were very expensive. And one night we wanted to go out, and I saw that it hurt. And she actually said, they hurt very much. I'm like, well, why do you wear them if they hurt? And her answer was, I spent 500 euros on these shoes. And I asked her, would it make a difference if these shoes had only cost $50 or euros or 10 euros, or if they had been free? She said, of course that would make a difference. I would not wear them. I would probably throw them away. See, that's a sunk cost fallacy. The 500 euros were spent. Now take now and look forward. Does it make sense to hurt yourself in these shoes or not? Whether they cost 500 euros or 5 or 0 should not play a role. That's the sunk cost fallacy. So we looked at the outcome bias, we looked at the sunk cost fallacy, and let me show you a third one of these 100 or so cognitive errors that actually has a bearing on the gender. A friend of mine moved from Frankfurt to Zurich. And he knows that I'm in Frankfurt a lot by car, so he called me up and said, would you mind dropping by my mother and taking this vase, it's a beautiful Murano hand-blown vase, and bring it to Zurich since you're driving this way anyway? I said, sure, no problem. So I went there, I picked up the vase at his mother's place in Frankfurt, drove it to Zurich, gave it to him, it didn't break, gave it to him, and he said, thank you so much. He pulled out the wallet and gave me 100 euros and said, thank you. I'm like, 100 euros? For what? He said, well, that's for the delivery. And a woman probably would not have done this. And that's called motivation crowding. If you bring in monetary incentives into a system that is driven by internal motivation or social motivation, it changes the whole game. It actually devalued our friendship, and it took quite a lot of weeks to get it back onto the same level it was before. People who run baby care centers know this. They know this intimately. There is no solution to this problem, or it hasn't been found yet. If you run a baby care center, you always have this, that parents come late. You want to close at 5 o'clock, but you have to wait until the last parent comes before you can close shop. You can't just put these little kids in a taxi and drive them home. So you have to wait until the last person comes. How do we usually solve this problem as a society? Well, you talk to the parents and say, look, it's not right when you come and pick up this child too late. We have to wait here. It's just not fair. So you kind of give them a hard time and nudge them into the way that it works. But at one point, some center managers had an idea. Why don't we institute a penalty, a monetary penalty if people are late? Guess what happened? It legitimized being late. Parents were later than before and more often. They said, well, I'm paying the penalty, so I can be late. And you see that, again, that's motivation crowding. It crowded out the internal and social pressures, the internal and social motivation, by instituting a monetary policy, a monetary incentive. And that's the crowding out effect. And oftentimes you have a system that kind of works in the social sphere, and we want to be very clear and very clear-cut, and we want to bring in the money because that's an even calculation. and that kills the whole relationship. So these were just 3 cognitive errors that I wanted to share with you, actually social errors, decision errors that I wanted to show with you. Many people ask me, but Rolf, does it make sense to focus on errors all the time? Wouldn't you want to rather work on the nice stuff, on the bright side of life? And it took me a long time to find a framing for that way of looking at the world. And here is the framing. We do not know what makes us successful. And we do not know for sure what makes us happy. The world is too complicated. There are millions of tips, millions of books out there, but sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. We really don't know. But we know for sure what destroys success or what destroys happiness. So negative knowledge is way more powerful than positive knowledge. So I opted to work on the negative knowledge of what not to do, of all these mistakes, and try to eliminate those. And then the upside will take care of itself. Thanks so much.